Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ruth Mercado Zizzo. I'm the Senior Director of Arts and Equity at Edvestors, and welcome to our virtual forum on pre-K-12 remote learning and arts education and creative youth development. It's great to see such a big turnout here. If I could ask, I'm going to put this in the chat window to please introduce yourself in the chat window. Everyone is actually on mute, and we're going to keep you on mute unless we ask you to speak. But please share your name, your pronouns, and your affiliation or organization, just so folks can see who else is on the call, because there looks like there's many of you arriving. So. And before we get started, just a few other sort of Zoom notes that this presentation, this forum will be recorded, and so don't feel like you have to scramble to figure out links or copy and paste links into your browser. We'll be sharing this with everyone who attended or who RSVP'd after the call. And I also wanted to just give a shout out and thank our co-hosts who helped put this together, Julia Gittleman from Mendelsohn Gittleman and Associates, Cara Elliott Ortega and Pascal Florestal from the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, and also Kata Swabeck, who I know is on the call from the Massachusetts Cultural Council. So thank them all. Thank you all for being here. It was great to put this together with them. We thought it would be a nice opportunity for everyone to get together to sort of share what they're doing in this work. And without further ado, I'm actually going to turn it over to Cara Elliott Ortega, who's going to say a few words.
Great, thanks, Ruth. And it's great to see so many people were able to join us today. Hopefully this isn't your 4th or 5th Zoom meeting of the day. I apologize if it is, but we're grateful that you're here. We at the City of Boston and the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture have really pivoted all of our work and time to think about what the creative sector needs right now. We've launched an artist relief fund in the 2nd week of March that we've raised over $100,000 for. We're really grateful to the Barr Foundation for supporting the position that Pascal is in, which is an Arts Emergency Preparedness Coordinator. And we've been holding meetings every Friday at 3. Anyone here is welcome to attend those. And using that time to really keep organizations connected to the city, providing public health updates, and having the opportunity to hear from each other about how we're all adjusting in these times. So through those conversations, I think it became clear really quickly, and thanks to some of the folks who are on this call, it became clear that we needed to hear specifically from arts education and creative youth development folks. You are all facing really specific challenges around creative delivery of online content, finding ways to engage in virtual learning and understanding what makes virtual engagements successful or not, how to keep people coming back for that content, and understanding how to stay in touch with students and their families. And you're also serving a part of our population right now, young people who are facing so many hurdles themselves. And so we want to be here to support you. We want to make sure that there's a platform for learning from each other, a way to share tips and methods and lessons learned. And we want to make sure that we at the city understand what your pain points are and what you're struggling with, so we can help advocate for what you need to do your work right now. So I think that's it from me, and just a big thank you to everybody who helped organize this, and thanks for being here. And I think now I'm turning it over to Kata.
Hey everyone, let me grab this 1 second. First of all, I'll be putting some links in the chat rooms for different things that Massachusetts Cultural Council has been offering. But I just wanted to give it just a quick overview before we get started with these wonderful speakers. A couple days ago, I met on the phone with a 16-year-old who described what she missed the most in attending her classes at Creative Youth Development Organization, and she replied that she missed being around people like me who have love for creativity, who think outside the box. In fact, when I am with them, she said, there is no box. It is my inspiration and my safe haven. So our creative development, youth development team here at Massachusetts Cultural Council has had the opportunity to do a whole lot of listening in the CYD field to young people finding out what happens when there are no longer these safe havens to be able to go to, and the virtual worlds are only the ones that they can access. Besides offering arts education, we know how important it is for our teaching artists, our schools, and our organizations, and how they are able to provide emotional and cultural support for almost like the second homes for so many of these young people. So what we've been hearing is just four main things, and I was just going to briefly go through those just to sort of set the stage of what we've been hearing. So the first thing is around basic needs. So during this time, we are really keenly aware of how magnified the inequity and the challenges are in our communities. We're reminded that for some of our students, the home environment is oftentimes not supportive, safe, or a healthy space where they have only limited art supplies and limited technology. And so therefore attending to these emotional needs and connecting our youth and families have been a big part of staff's job. The second part is just trying to figure out creativity in this virtual world. So it's going to be great. They're going to get to see a lot of great examples of that today. But teachers and organizations have been amazingly responsive to the COVID crisis, showing a lot of flexibility and being able to pivot by designing these virtual programs and virtual support with our young people. Many have been able to offer these weekly classes on Zoom, but they talk about the real difficulty in engaging young people when really disengagement has been such a necessary survival skill for so many of them. And that brings us to the third point, which is stability and innovation. So there's kind of a tension between trying to do what was done before and recognizing that those approaches really aren't often suited for this virtual environment. So there's been a big learning curve in learning how to do iMovie and Zoom and Acapella and Google Classroom and WhatsApp and even Final Cut Pro. You know, so like, how do you teach online when you can't really read the room? And how do you help channel this really big flood of new information that comes at both young people and their teachers? So folks have found that providing familiarity and structure, also with check-ins and food and fun to be really important. And then the last thing is just real self-care, because, you know, teaching online seems to take kind of a different type of stamina. Fatigue is super real, especially when we have this real uncertain time frame ahead. And therefore building of networks has really helped, which brings us to today. So we're really excited to have speakers to discuss different examples of their programs, their challenges, successes, and how they are implementing the CYD principles. So by having this conversation with a wide audience, we also have the opportunity to really further address the disconnect that sometimes exists, I think, between our schools and nonprofits, where often the young people are left holding demands that seem to come from all directions. So these speakers today represent a wide range in Massachusetts, both in school and out of school, both large and small organizations, different populations with unique challenges, and different focuses where they both build short and long-term relationships with our youth. So we're connected through our desire to help our young people create, connect, and catalyze change in their lives and communities. And we appreciate being able to hear from all of you. And now, Tony Beatrice, the Executive Director of Arts from Boston Public Schools, will start us off by offering an overview on what's happening in the arts in our schools.
And before doing that, if Pascal, who's controlling the slide deck, if you could just go to the next slide. I believe there's just an overview of the agenda that Kata just shared. Thank you so much. And idea of who's presenting today. And again, if you have questions for any of the presenters as they are speaking, please use the chat window to do that. And we'll be monitoring that in real time. And we'll try to address them as we go, but then we also are leaving space at the end for any outstanding questions and also for others to contribute and share things that you also might be working on and encountering. So Tony, are you on? I just want to make sure you're on the call and you can unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. And so I'll let you take it away and just let Pascal know when you want her to move the slides. So.
We could start with first slide. Move over. We could switch. Yep. Thank you. Thank you all for having me today. I think the work that we've been doing in BPS since we closed on March 17th has been heroic. Everyone from the superintendent down to the people working within the school buildings, even the custodians. Everyone's been working so hard. Over the past few weeks, over 20,000 Chromebooks have been delivered to students. And with that, we've been making that shift to remote learning from in-person learning. So I just wanted to talk about how we've been approaching this, both from a teacher perspective and also with student access points. So we started out with our arts educators by having weekly Zoom meetings, and this served multiple purposes. We split them up by arts content areas. So all the music teachers met, theater teachers, visual arts, this past week, dance. And it was really a great opportunity just for everyone to share out what they were experiencing. Secondly, to just see other arts educators, especially since we're usually alone in our buildings or even alone in our art form within the big building Zoom meetings. It's really important for us to connect and cross grade levels. And it also helped out our central arts staff. I'm the executive director. Amy Wedge is our content specialist for visual art, Paul Sedgwick for theater, and Emmanuel Toledo is our program director for performing arts. So these meetings really helped zone in on what we needed to focus on to support our teachers. As many of you have probably experienced, there were so many Google Docs going around on the internet and spreadsheets of all these resources. And so we really just wanted to take those resources and see what would work best for our students in the BPS. We can switch to the next slide. We also created Google Classroom professional learning communities for each of the content areas. So we realized that just meeting once a week was not enough. Our teachers needed to stay connected throughout the week, and that's where we've been posting some of our curriculum materials. Additionally, on our website, BPSArts.org, we just launched a new remote learning Google site where we're putting up some of our resources. What we've done is we've taken whatever resources we think work, and we've put them into Google Slides, kind of with the prompt of being inspired through some videos or examples, given some instructional videos as well, and then giving a prompt for students to try it on their own. That seems to work out well, and for teachers, they can just borrow those Google Slides and throw them into their Google Classrooms. We can move to the next slide. And students have been accessing our education through their Chromebooks, through Google Classroom, Class Dojo, Flipgrid. Those seem to be the big three softwares that everyone's using. And additionally, teachers have been using Zoom or Google Hangouts or Google Meets. We found at the younger age, especially, we're hearing good feedback from our teachers. Arts educators are kind of bumping into grade level classroom Zoom meetings. So like if a second grade class is meeting once a week, on Zoom, our arts teachers may go in for 10 or 15 minutes and do a lesson during that time. We found that that's had some really great engagement. We can go to the next slide. And additionally, our teachers have been working really hard, not only building out their Google Classroom spaces, but some of them have actually developed websites of their own for students to access. This is an example of Alyssa Pedro from the Hernandez School, who you'll hear from in a little bit. Next slide, please. And this just shows a Google Classroom. This has been really helpful as well for us to share out modules from Classroom. We can just copy paste it to somebody else's Google Classroom if teachers need help with that. We've also been doing some one-on-one trainings with teachers. So this has been a huge shift for some of our arts educators. Technology has not been something that we've been accessing, especially for ensemble directors. This is completely new. And so the amount of support that's needed, as Kathy was talking about before, has just been incredible. And so we're trying to meet that need. Next slide, please. And so we've also started some arts challenges. Each week, each content area has an art challenge for the district. And also the district highlights one of those challenges as kind of a broader challenge that's spread out on social media. So 2 weeks ago, for example, we did a dance challenge where students made up dance moves to the song Waving Flag, and then we mashed it together on iMovie. And then this past week, we asked students to create artwork thanking our hospital workers, and we're putting that into a virtual mosaic and then sending that out to the Boston healthcare community. So that's been really a great opportunity to get teachers also, well, not get them, but they've been taking that and kind of molding it to a prompt that would work that's age appropriate for the different grade levels that they're teaching. And it also builds excitement. We're just trying to find moments of joy and these challenges have been doing that. If we can go to the next slide. And additionally, we've started a partnership with the Boston Neighborhood Network in creating a half-hour-long special focused on arts for students in grades pre-K to 2. And this includes engaging sing-alongs and dancing and visual artwork. And we're also highlighting the winners of the previous week's arts challenges. This example video you can see right there, this is Kara Washington from the Mather Elementary School, and she was using the Acapella app to create an engaging sing-along for anyone who was watching. Next slide. And I just want to talk about some of the key things that we're learning. I was just meeting this morning with the music teachers. Engagement right now is just so important, and it's been easier for the younger students, and it's a bigger challenge for the high school students. And there's definitely more weight right now on high school students. Some of them are working. They're working in essential jobs. Some of them are babysitting, and so they don't have time to go onto the computer. Also, we're trying to make sure that the lessons that we're posting are bite-sized, very small, and approachable, because we got to remember, like, it takes time for students to access the computer, to learn new software. For some of them, they haven't used this before. So we have to take all of that into account. If you have any long questions, Cara had a meeting online a couple weeks ago, and I got bombarded with questions on the private chat. So I just wanted to throw up Google form. If anyone had more intense questions, they can reach me through that way or through the arts team, and we'll get back to you. That's it.
Thank you so much, Tony. I know a couple questions came up. I believe it was Mark from C1 who asked if we could include a link to the slide deck for people who want to follow along in a separate link window. So I just put that into the chat box if you want to copy and paste that link into your browser. And then we had a question that I believe Dev asked that was second and thirded by some folks that asked if your weekly arts meetings are open to arts partners.
They haven't been, but I don't see why we couldn't start doing that. And I think it might be helpful if we just started a meeting with arts partners alone to figure out what I know. I was getting some questions this week about how partners were able to access students. And I think that would be a good discussion to have. So yeah, we could do that.
Great. And I'm just checking. I think those were all the questions for now, but I know, Tony, you're hanging out, and people can always ask you more questions at the end. So thank you so much for that update and for all the work you and I know all your team and all the arts teachers have been doing. It's been pretty amazing.
I want to give a really big shout out to the arts educators. They've really done above and beyond.
Automatic name.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
So I did not, and I just.
Thank you. And just a reminder, if you're attending the call, if you could actually just
for now stay here
to cut down on background noise, that would be great. We're gonna move on to our next presenters. It would be Nicole Goy and Mia Branco from Open Door Arts. So Nicole and Mia, I will let you take it away.
All right, thank you, Ruth. So I'm Nicole Goy. I'm the Managing Director of Open Door Arts. We used to be VSA Massachusetts, so you may be familiar with our old name. We work to increase access, participation, and representation by people with disabilities in arts and culture. And the program that we're going to be talking about today is called Cool Schools, and Mia is going to give you more details on what we've been doing there. You know, like all of you, I think, you know, we're kind of have been, you know, running and pausing and running and pausing nonstop since the beginning of March, just trying to figure out what's the best response. And it's been, you know, every day a journey of discovery and adaptation. And I think what was very clear to us from the beginning is that our three priorities were to make sure that our students continued learning art. And as Keita said earlier, for many of our students, that 1 hour a week or however, you know, much they get every week is, you know, essential and life-changing and critical. And so we wanted to make sure that that continued to happen as much as possible. So that was priority number one. Priority number 2 was making sure that we were able to pay our teaching artists and our staff. And priority number 3 was making sure that we were able to honor the commitments of our funders. So we went very quickly to have a conversation with our school partners and our funders to make sure that we were able to transition online right away. So, just want to also just take a minute to kind of share love and solidarity. I know it's been a very difficult time for all of us and for our students and our families, and takes a big professional and also personal toll. So it's just wonderful to see so many of us here kind of supporting each other and doing what we need to do for our kids. So Mia, who is our Director of Education, is going to tell you a little bit more specifically all the details of what we've been doing.
All right. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to our organizers for this opportunity for us all to come together. I'm going to be flying through this because we don't have a lot of time, so apologies for the holes in what I'm saying and for the speed. So the Cool Schools program, just quickly, we operate, our art forms are all art forms. We do visual art, we do music, we do drama, we do filmmaking, we do comics, we do it all. And our ages are K0 through 22. So there's a large variance in format and content. So when transitioning to an online learning opportunities, we had a wide range of things to be considering. Our primary focuses were accessibility, both in learning style, communication style, as well as access to materials and access to technology. The other primary consideration we had is that we are a partner, so we do not have direct access to our students. We need to go through our school partners to have that access to students, which I know is something that got brought up earlier as being an added kind of challenge to a lot of arts partners in creating online material. So our approach to getting this started when none of us knew what was going on, I've deemed it the spaghetti approach, which is that we cooked a huge pot of spaghetti and started chucking it at the wall to see what stuck. And so with that approach, we asked our teaching artists directly to come up with proposals for what they felt they could create that were in their means that they had tech at home, as well as their abilities, because we all have different abilities with technology, as well as what would be best for their students. So with those proposals, we've developed a wide range of approaches to online learning material, and we are definitely still learning as we go. We're in week 4 of having been able to create materials. We were able to get moving really, really fast because we're a small organization staff-wise. Wide reach, small organization. So that gives us a lot of flexibility, and we can be nimble, but it also means that we've been all working around the clock. So from all of that learning, we developed video lessons. We developed some that are Zoom classes, so those are just starting to get started. And Google Classrooms, everything we develop is sent through a link format so that it can be anywhere that it is accessible to our students. We found that the best method is to talk directly with the classroom teachers. We were originally going through principals and administrators who are wonderful, but they are so busy. So talking directly to the classroom teachers is the way to figure out what each classroom is doing and how you can work within that system. We have a couple examples up on the slides here. If you could click on virtual Cool Schools drama class, I just want to illustrate one thing that we've been really proud of coming up with is using Google Forms as an opportunity to expand your ability to get interaction from your students when you don't have direct access to them. So this is a form that one of our drama teachers made. If you're able to scroll down, she has videos that she's embedded that are uploaded onto YouTube. You can hit next at the bottom. And within this, she's then able to, you can just keep scrolling, ask students about how they're feeling today. So she can get a sense of what's going on. Notice that we're using visual reinforcements of the information. You can hit next again. And then there is the activity. And so what she does is she asks students to kind of submit information, you can keep scrolling, based off of the project of the week. And then she takes their submissions and feeds it back to them as a newscast the following week. So here are the interviews that people did at this elementary school, and so on and so forth. So we've also used that strategy. This is a very elaborate one with some of our more classrooms that are working with very different communication abilities. We have simplified those forms even more to be really directly asking about engagement with that YouTube video. If you can go back to the slides, we have another example that we have there that I'll let people look at on their own. It says Springtime Blossom Visual Arts Lesson. The reason why we chose that one is because it shows a teaching artist who was not keen to be on video herself. And so she created slides that are a multi-part lesson that includes the art activity itself, as well as a field trip to an online, she brings them to a national park one day when they're doing a art project on springtime. She brings them to all sorts of places, as well as a movement activity. So that we're also thinking about getting kids up and moving and not just in front of their screens. The last thing I want to share, because I know I'm short on time here, we've made a 7 tips for accessibility in online learning design. This is not comprehensive in any way, shape, or form, if we can click on that briefly. But this is something that we've learned about as we're moving in this journey. So the first one is use closed captioning, whether that's on Zoom, whether that's on Google Meet. Closed captioning doesn't really work on Zoom. You have to use a third party. But know what your closed captioning options are for accessibility purposes. Additionally, on YouTube, if your closed captioning is done well, the auto translate can work. So take the time to go through your closed captioning, add punctuation, check for spelling errors, make sure there's no swears. The closed captioning automatic doesn't always work very well. Reinforce instruction with images, text, descriptions, and movement. Choose accessible text options. Prepare your participants, and what we mean by this, in the same way when you're teaching, you would have a schedule, you would be forecasting what's happening, what materials they might need for your lesson. Do the same thing in your online materials. There's just a couple more down there if you're able to scroll. Check your tech, offer choices for interaction, and finally, most importantly, if you are able to, ask your students, get their feedback, learn what would be helpful to them in accessing your materials. I'll close my time here with you by just saying the biggest things we have learned from how we can adjust to this process is that as administrators, we are now the tech department, we are now the creative solutions department, and we are also the participants and cheerleaders. It's really been quite remarkable how teaching in a vacuum affects us as teachers. We're so used to getting that energy from our students, getting that feedback loop, and to not have that really takes a toll. So if you are the administrator for your teachers, participate in their lessons, give them those comments in the YouTube, make the project, send them a photo of how you participated. It really does a lot for us to feel like we are connected to each other. And my last little tidbit, get yourself a hard drive or external storage situation, because video files are so large. And if you are helping people to upload those, it is the most practical bit of advice that I can give. You don't want to spend your time cleaning out your computer so that you can help somebody with their video. See if you can figure out that, that very practical challenge of your hard drive ahead of time. So sorry for the flying through that.
That's wonderful, Mia and Nicole. Thank you so much for all the work you're doing to just, and just to be so explicit about making sure that what is offered remotely is something that is accessible to students of all learning needs. With everything moving so quickly and going on, I think it's an easy thing for all of us to sort of forget. And so it's just such a great reminder of having that front of mind. So thank you so much.
Sorry, Ruth, I forgot to
Yeah.
mention that last link there, online learning experiences. That is a website that we've put together where every single bit of online material we've created, as well as the resources that were really useful to us in the creation of those materials, are all listed and curated, so anybody can see anything we've created at any time.
That's great. Just one question that just popped up in the chat for Mia, you, and or Nicole is if any of these resources are available in other languages, because I know you mentioned translation that you were exploring. So.
They're all in English at the moment. We have decided that we are using YouTube exclusively for any of our videos because of the formats that we tested. YouTube did the best in the auto translation opportunities. So anything written is in English, but we are working with all of our teachers to make sure do our best to make sure our closed captioning is carefully edited so that our auto translate can be the best that it can be. But again, we are still working through these kinks, and that is one thing that we're trying to figure out additional solutions for.
Great.
So if anybody else has advice.
That's super helpful. And I know this came up if people missed it in the chat window. I think it was Morgan from CMCB who asked about YouTube blocks and filtering because most students are using BPS issued Chromebooks, and there might be some natural filtering that's happening about their ability to access YouTube. And Tony did respond in the chat that the BPS IT technology department is working on making those videos not get filtered through whatever security firewalls they have in place on those. So we're all learning as we go. So thank you for that amazing work. We're going to move on to our next presenter, Alyssa San Pedro from the Hernandez K-8 school. She's the music teacher there. So Alyssa, I'll let you take it away.
Hi, so it's Alyssa San Pedro, and
My apologies.
Okay, it's spelt misleadingly. So I'm the music teacher at the Rafael Hernandez K-8 school. It is a dual language school, which means that we are teaching and learning in 2 languages every day. For the music classroom, as a bilingual educator, it's really amazing because I get to bring my whole self to class every day. I get to speak in Spanish and speak in English and really give students both a chance to practice their new language and a chance to feel more comfortable in their home language when they're in music and have a bit of that like comfort and stretch in what we're doing. So if you can click into the website, you'll see that everything is as translated as possible. Everything's as translated as possible so that it is easy to access for not only students, but also their families. And if you can pause right there where it says distance learning, aprendiendo desde lejos. So at the top of the page, there's the BBS district things sort of up there because that's for all of the grade levels. And this website actually existed before we went to remote learning. So there are some things on there that I've kept for that sense of continuity, and a lot of new things that I've added now that this is the home base for what's happening in music class. So there's a short description for families on how I'm going to be doing things. 3rd through 8th grade is actually on Google Classroom. So what I'm going to really be showing you is for kindergarten through 2nd, since they do have BPS emails, but neither the students nor the families are very used to how to work with that. So just a link to the website seems to be a little easier to manage. So if you can click on Peter and the Wolf, yeah. So I'm sure we're all familiar with Peter and the Wolf, and I started this series of activities that first Monday that we were out of school to really just have something to start with. And what I did for that is really the model for everything else I've done. So it's one video, 5-7 minutes at the most, and then an extension activity. And what's going on in the video is exactly what Mia was saying, right? Oh, you're going to need this thing. You can find it here. I'm going to be using whatever, and going through it that way. And then again, because it's a bilingual school, I, in the course of that video, explain everything in both languages. And what we try to avoid at the Hernandez is the direct translation of like, oh, I said this, now I'm going to say it this way, but try to make it more of a natural feel of how you would normally talk to someone who can understand both. You don't translate immediately right away. You come back to it later. And if you scroll a little further down, there's space for students to share their work, or for me to share their work actually, because this is a series of activities that's for kindergarten through 5th grade. So normally those kids really wouldn't see each other in music class anyway, but this way they have a chance to share, and then their siblings working together so they can sort of duke it out on who had the best drawing or who did the best version of this. So that's a nice little competitive edge. And if you go to 1 through 2 assignments on the left-hand side, yeah, you're gonna see a lot of things. And if you scroll through that, it's gonna look really overwhelming. And that is one of the challenges that I've had, is that I recognize that this can look really overwhelming for students, especially if you didn't get internet access until a week from now, which for some of our families is the case. We as a community have done, I think, an amazing job of getting the basics to our families. We have about a quarter of our population who is right now getting help with food, and we're getting them, all of them, help with food. So now that those are kind of out of the way, we can focus on the other things. But I have everything up here asynchronously in both languages, really visually guided. Like there's a YouTube button, you press play. They're pretty clear things. So that way the students who didn't get what they needed until today can pop in and, yes, this looks really overwhelming, but okay, I'll just go to the last thing that they have. And in that last thing, I'll say, okay, if you're starting with this video, you got to go back to assignment number 2 because you're not going to get it if you don't do that first step. So everything is really sequential, but is acknowledging that maybe you're stepping in a few days late or weeks late. You'll also see there's a feedback survey option, which is that chance to hear how I'm doing. I get a few emails from families. I get some sharing of work, but it sometimes feels like teaching into the void. And so the feedback survey is a nice way to say like, okay, I've posted all these things. What did you like? What was hard for you? For the older kids, I put, what's stopping you from getting your work done? And the top 3 answers are, I have other things to do for my family. I don't understand the assignment, which is like normal life. And then there's a lot of answering like, oh, my annoying sibling's here, so I can't record myself, or I can't do these things. So those help me decide like, okay, maybe we shift away from recording ourselves for a little while and we can come back to it. The other thing I wanted to say about all of what's here is that I think it really addresses the challenge of things being overwhelming, of the equity of access to technology. You can step in, but what's really worked, like Tony has said, is this combination of asynchronous things that live here and will be here every day that we're away, and popping in for those synchronous moments of like, hey, I'm here, I have 10 minutes with you. The lesson that I would have posted, or that I did post, is only 10 minutes, so let's do it right now. And so for the kids who getting to this website is a step too far, but we did figure out how to get them on Zoom, then okay, you got me in Zoom, and that's great. And I can tell you then how to get there. But trying to catch them at really both ends of the equation, I think is really working, and really helps me get that feedback of like, oh, okay, you do like this song. I was right. That's what I really noticed, is in that moment in ordinary time, you can be like, oh, you don't like this song, I'm gonna finish this and move on to the next thing. But if I'm gonna post it there for months on end, then like it better be good. So it's a nice litmus test of like, oh, okay, this is working. I'll put something else on it. We can keep going. And just really making it easy to access for everyone, and not have the language or not have the tech be another barrier, So I'm trying to eliminate the language barrier from what's happening. So you can bring your whole self to music class just like you normally would. And I think to Mia's point, again, that means every week you have 3 options. You have Peter and the Wolf, you have the BPSArts free challenge, and you have your actual work. And as long as you're doing one of those 3, to me, like, I did what I needed to do. You found an access point, you got to make music, you got to express yourself a little bit, and I'm not gonna hound you for all the other things. But yeah, so I think that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. I think there was just a question around just clarifying that you are a certified full-time BPSArts music teacher at Hernandez. Could you actually just talk a little bit about how often you're able to push in to see some students through whether it's Google Classroom or any other method? And just a reminder to everyone on the call that we are sharing this slide deck and a recording of this forum after it's done. So go ahead, Alyssa.
Yeah, so to answer that question, yeah, the link is there, so you're welcome to peruse it at your leisure. How often do I get into the Zooms? It is getting better every week. I think we were also a big bowl of spaghetti at the beginning. It was like, okay, we're all gonna do Zoom. And nobody really talked about, like, oh, there are 4 siblings who go to the same school in this one house. How are they gonna do that? And so it's been easier for me to learn, like, okay, 2nd grade meets every day from 10 to 12. Schedule me in for Thursdays, I'll be your special guest, and I'll give you a break. That's been easier to talk to the classroom teacher and say, when do you meet? Can I be there? I promise it's really quick. So for the younger grades, about once a week. And then for the older grades, I can schedule my own a little more frequently, and they're also about once a week. 3rd through 5th are a complicated block. Their classroom teachers are still sort of figuring out what works best for them. So they haven't made a decision yet on how often they'll be Zooming. So I can't really decide yet where I fit in what's happening. Was there another question bundled in there?
Nope, I think you got it all. And I know you're hanging out in case people have questions at the end too after everyone presents. But thank you so much for sharing all this amazing work that you're doing. And it's such a great example of sort of bilingual education, which I know you already do at the Hernandez in person, but just the idea that you're able to really simplify sort of the different entry points for students, and also, but still maintain sort of the challenging for them, like the challenges for them to complete work and even maintain a sense of community with each other and when they have the opportunity to share work with you that you then post. So thank you for that. We're going to move on to our next presenter, moving right along. It's my pleasure to introduce Trey Pratt from Boston Children's Course. So Trey, I'll let you take it away.
Sure thing, and thank you so much. It's, of course, nice to be with everybody virtually. I'm having a sensation where I can't wait to see all of you in person and see how tall everybody is. So I just want to talk a little bit about what we've started to call BCC Online. And essentially, we have mirrored everyone else's process of saying, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And really what works best for us and for our communities. And so, I think it was March 13th that we canceled our first rehearsal. And the next day we decided that we were going to pilot a whole bunch of different options the next week. So we were like, well, let's throw a session on Zoom and figure out what this feels like. So I'm excited to talk to you sort of about our pilot and then also our pivot that happened thereafter, and especially zooming in on upper elementary school kids and middle schoolers. You should all know Boston Children's Course serves about 450 kids from all over Greater Boston, all with different, from a lot of different school districts with different schedules and all this sort of thing. So we really decided to zoom in on the after school hours. So the programming that I'm talking about now happens at 4:30 or 5 o'clock daily each week. So we'll go to the next slide, please. early in the process, we had to really set what the parameters were for, sort of what our goals were going to be for this online engagement. And chief among them was to stay engaged with our students in basically just genuine social interaction. So, the teachers were feeling the distance from the kids, and we also wanted to make sure that the kids still had access to each other because they weren't seeing each other in school in their various classrooms all day. So we wanted to make sure that that social connection was there. And I say build students' independence and musical skills because it's sort of interesting to think about how an online platform relative to a typical choral experience, it feels like a lot of individual learning. Even when you're live in a Zoom session, you're still just sitting there singing with one voice coming through your computer. And so we really decided to put a priority on that and really place a priority on building students' independence and their musical skills. We also, though, wanted to make sure to keep coming back to and reinforcing concert repertoire that we had been studying in person. And so we have placed a priority on progress in terms of our concert literature. And then connected to that is this idea of trying to find a North Star for our kids in terms of, why come back? Why are we doing little vignettes of smaller pieces? Or are we going to really focus on some bigger material that we might get to perform, in May or June or July or whenever the next time we meet together? And one thing that we've done to keep on track in that way is to try to give checkpoints that feel satisfying. So for instance, a virtual choir experience where a kid can do an asynchronous recording of themselves. And then Robbie Jacobs, our colleague, works it into this fantastic video. And then the kids later that week can see their product adding up to something or see their voices adding up to something, which is one of the special delights of choral music because you're doing it with other people. And so really trying to replicate that has been an interesting challenge, but we're trying to figure it out as we're going along. So we'll go to the next slide. Essentially, BCC serves students that are 7 years old all the way through seniors in high school, so 18 years old. And we tried to figure out a balance of what, how we're going to focus what activity on what age group. That's our primary way of thinking about it. And so what we've done is focused our live sessions, our Zoom sessions, which we call mini lessons. We're focusing those, the younger kids are getting 3 of those a week. Intermediate level, which is our middle school level, gets 2 of those a week, and the high school level choirs each get 1 lesson a week of live interaction. And that's because for the asynchronous material, we noticed in that first pilot week that the high school kids were the ones that were immediately able to join us asynchronously and really commit to recording themselves. The middle schoolers were a gray area, and then our younger folks, we had only a couple people that participated that first week. That participation has grown, luckily, over the course of the 3 or 4 weeks that we've been like this. But our focus live in the mini lessons is with the elementary and middle school folks. But you'll see other touch points in here as well. So we'll talk about the virtual choir, which is essentially synchronizing a whole bunch of people using Logic Pro. I have a little slide later that talks about that technology, but syncing up everyone. Then we are also uploading YouTube lessons. This is a little bit of it lags behind a little bit the live sessions because what our teaching faculty is able to do is take their live lesson, what would have been their live lesson, and then re-record it in a format that works better for YouTube. So we were trying the first couple of weeks to try to record our Zoom sessions and then, with the hope of being able to edit them and publish them. But it was too difficult to sort of delete the names and dwellings of our kids. And so we decided that we're not going to do that anymore. So it's just a nuance of that. We're also offering voice lessons for our middle school and high schoolers. Those are our age groups that work pretty well for voice lessons. It was interesting that we don't typically offer voice lessons as a regular part of our programming. And it was a slow start, but now this week, all of the lessons that we are offered are full, which is pretty cool. We're also doing a listen in series, which is basically bringing in cool people for our kids to talk to. We're continuing that, which is a pretty easy transition into online format. And importantly, I want to highlight that we've really relied on our Youth Advisory Council to help us along as we go through these different technological developments, because we're, again, we're looking for feedback and trying to figure out, are we doing things that are actually needed, right? Are we doing things that are actually helping? Are we doing things that people are really engaging with? And so they've been invaluable as we go along through this process. One thing that they pointed out to us last week, they were like, this is also great. We would love to just talk to you guys. So why don't you give us a call? And so what we've done now is all of our teaching staff is calling our students and their families to just say hello and check in on them, which has really been powerful for us. Next slide. So these are, I think they're actually just still images. Pascal, they can't become videos, do they? Okay, great. So that's fine. So these are just examples from our various offerings. So the very first one, you'll see a really simple interaction of, okay, folks, we're gonna read these rhythmic patterns on tas and tatis. You'll see that they're fragments of a song, there are lyrics below. And you'll also see the small group of people, I think that's 15 attendees. That was from our first session during one of the pilots. And you can see how it started really simple. And then in the very next frame, as our teaching staff became more comfortable with Zoom as a technology, we have my colleague Irene here teaching around, actually. So what she did was use her phone to record herself on a cappella, to where the phone could actually be singing, and then she could sing with the kids at the same time. And the kids actually had an experience of feeling as though they were singing around live, because they were able to sync up on their end, which is all a lot of mental gymnastics to envision. But what we're learning is that as long as a sound source is coming from one place, the kids can really engage in a way that feels satisfying in their own room. But then, of course, we don't get to synchronize with them. And so that's a little, not as uncomfortable for the teacher. You'll just see a still image right there of one of my singers in what we call Central Training Choir. Her name's Annie, and her mom was really gracious and sent over a video of her participating with us. And so it was really good for us to sort of see what's happening on the other end. Like, okay, what does it look like for our kids to participate? And you can read a lot into this image in terms of some of the limitations of this work, in terms of access and devices that are available in the house, because there's the computer right there, but there's also the implied device of the mother's cell phone. All this sort of thing is important to keep track of when we're looking at these images. The last little image there is to a video that I'm just going to post in the chat box. Y'all can check that out on your own time, but it's really the great work of my colleague Robbie, who is producing really amazing virtual choir videos that I hope you check out. So check out that link in the box. Pascal, can you go to the next slide? Great. So this just gives you a taste of the technology BCC is using. And again, I think there are a lot of questions in terms of access, and you can see that under the limitations. But the implied technology that we're using for these two main programs, the mini lessons and the virtual choirs, okay, are Zoom, YouTube, Final Cut Pro, and Logic Pro. Okay, so thank goodness I don't have to touch Final Cut and Logic because it's really confusing to me. But those are the ones that we're using to harness the virtual choir capability. And I think in the slides there's actually a link to Robbie giving a webinar about that. So if you want to go learn about it, go for it. It's really awesome. I will warn you, it is extremely intensive and takes a long time to make these things happen. So just be ready for that once you start going down that rabbit hole. But Robbie does a really good job sort of talking you through how to do it, especially from an amateur's perspective, because that's what we all are right now as we navigate these technologies. On the other side of this technology is assuming that the BCC families have access to something like Zoom and YouTube, computers. But again, you start to see how people can more easily participate when they have multiple devices or access to a smartphone, or their parents can be on the smartphone while they take over the computer. Using Zoom, we realized that, I think it was in our first regularly scheduled mini lessons. So in our pivot week, we decided that we were going to offer 8 lessons a week at the various levels. And in the very first one, we had a Zoom bombing. Okay. So what we did was we put our links online on social media because we wanted all of our families to know about it, not just the ones that religiously read our emails, which is, you know, questionable. But so we published these links, and of course the wide world got onto it, and people jumped into the first session and started yelling expletives. And thank goodness it was in a high school setting. It was a high school group, so it wasn't as, you know, sort of earth-shattering, but it was something that we had to shut it down and sort of restart what we were thinking in terms of Zoom. So what we decided is that we're only publishing our links in email. We have a waiting room feature, which we all just experienced getting into this meeting today. And we also have 3 staff members present in every single session. That's one of the benefits of our small but robust staff, is that we're all administrators and teachers, the people that are in our programs team. So we're able to have 3 teacher-minded people, 1 head teacher, 1 person that's serving as a teaching fellow, and then 1 of the administrative staff that's serving as a monitor who's able to keep all the technology in line. But that's an amazing luxury of an after-school program that has a whole bunch of choir teachers walking around, you know. We use numeric passwords only now, so people can still, you know, can more easily log into their phone. So if you have a password that's randomly generated through Zoom with letters, they'll get a different password for the phone. So that's something that we're noticing. And finally, we're really trying to utilize the breakout room feature more and more, even at the younger kids level, because they're able to interface with each other in a way that doesn't make them feel muted, right? So obviously we're talking really in terms of muting each other in this format, but when we break into the breakout rooms, they're able to interface and engage and have the good social interaction that we are trying to prioritize. In terms of limitations, you know, again, it's a lot about access. It's also about navigating what BCC's scope is. In other words, you know, are we going to be able to realistically deliver Chromebooks to our families? It's a big question mark, right? And monitoring who needs what is another thing that's a hardship for us. So I just offer that as a limitation of what we're doing. And again, you know, those of us who are working in the group setting, synchronizing a temporal activity like music in time is really difficult. So we're really looking forward to whoever invents that magical power. I don't know if there is a next slide, but we can check out. This is just an example of what those Zoom sessions look like, which you're all familiar with, but you can see that siblings are participating. If you're looking closely, you'll notice that there are 3 adults and 37 students, which is pretty amazing. I think our most populated session so far has been 47 folks, and it was actually from our youngest age group, which is pretty exciting to see everybody in this scenario. Next slide. Cool. So this talks about some things that we're doing moving forward. We are, like I mentioned before, we in talks with our Youth Advisory Council decided that it was really important for our teachers to call our families and check in with them just on a personal level, but to see what they're needing at this moment from BCC. We're also looking toward our year-end evaluations, which have actually started yesterday. So we are doing Zoom calls with each of our students to see where they're going to be in our organization next year, because it's a leveled organization in terms of age and skill. So we're trying to assess that and be really ready for the next step. And then finally, a major question is, how the heck are we going to recruit, right? So I'm really glad, you know, Tony, I'm like, let's have a partnership call, because it's really going to be critical for us to know how we can show ourselves in a ready way to folks that don't know about us yet. And we're excited to collaborate with everybody that's on this call about that. I think that's it. There might be some links on the last page, but that's it.
Trey, thank you so much. So appreciate you being so transparent just about like the challenges that you've encountered and what's worked and what hasn't worked with different platforms and technology, knowing that that the choral discipline is really challenging, like it to do virtually. So really appreciate that. And also just highlighting something that struck me when you mentioned how you pivoted a little bit and were really relying on your youth feedback from your council, your youth council, and just how that's so in keeping with, you know, the value of youth voice and that primary creative youth development principle. So just want to give a shout out to that. And I know you're hanging out too for the rest of this call. So if people have other questions for Trey, we can probably cover them at the end. I just noticed somebody asked if there'll be an attendance list for this. We can compile a list of who RSVP'd. We probably will not share email addresses because we did not ask permission to do that. And so, but we can send a list of people who RSVP'd and their affiliations. And also, when the recording of this is sent out, in the chat window at the beginning of the chat, we did ask everyone to introduce themselves with their names, pronouns, and affiliations. So thanks again. And we're going to go now to Betsy Gibbons from the ICA to talk about the work she's doing with the teens in her program.
Thanks, Ruth. Hi, I'm Betsy. I'm from the Institute of Contemporary Art, or ICA, and we're a contemporary art museum. Normally we're a physical space out in the Seaport where you can come and experience for yourself contemporary art in all of its media and in our galleries and on our stage, take part in experiential learning opportunities or interpretive programs and more. Just enjoy the space looking out over the water. And I'm the director of teen programs there, so I'm really focused on developing programs, opportunities, and resources with and for teens. And I get to work with an amazing team of educators and teaching artists and teaching assistants, including a lot of alums from our teen programs. And so this slide just shows you some of what we do when we are open. It's a teen night in the middle, and our photography, one of our photography programs on the right, and on the left is one of our film programs, fast forward. So there's just a couple links on this page. Other than those images, it's just a link to our teen website, icateens.org. And then also we have a teen arts education hub on the icaboston.org/teen-hub. So that's all that is. Pascal, can you go to the next slide? So I thought it would be helpful to give you a sense of what our teen programs look like when we're open, just give you a sense of the structure. And this is my like quick visualization of that. We have been building teen programs for more than a decade, and therefore have kind of this whole structure of a triangle, a funnel, whatever works for you as a visualization. But we have these big gateway programs that are, you know, really high numbers of young people involved, but it's the lowest level of commitment. Our teen nights, hundreds of young people come through. We have a school partnership program called Wall Talk. We have sort of drop-in programs such as the current that our Teen Arts Council plans, but that are like drop-in for people who come through. We have short-term programs that happen, but the extended programs are really kind of what's continuing right now. And so that's that chunk of programs at the bottom. And we also do fieldwide work, which is what that Teen Arts Hub kind of captures. And so we have teen convenings and a teen arts conference, so on and so forth. But I give this to you just to give you some context for what it normally looks like. And also to say that in all of this, our goals, our main outcomes for young people are thinking about strengthened identity, creative skill development, and community engagement. And so, you know, now with us being closed, we're continuing these extended programs. And I thought I would kind of focus on just one of those today, which is our Teen Arts Council. They're a creative leadership group. They play, you know, in ways kind of a similar role to the group at BCC and many, many other places. But they plan teen nights. They do interviews with exhibiting artists. They plan other programs. They, you know, make the ICA a place that teens want to be and really feel comfortable. That's their goal. So they kind of serve this community of teens in Boston and beyond. And, you know, they're continuing to do that. So when we much like everyone, kind of closed, I think, for the first day was March 13th. And then we took a week to where we figured out what we were doing. And then we started really re-engaging with the teens in our extended programs, holding weekly check-ins on Zoom each week with each of the groups. And we kind of started being like, okay, well, we know we need to check in with them. Like, we know that they want to check in. We know we want to check in. We knew we'd also have to do one-on-one check-ins, and that has been a very important part of our process of, you know, checking in with them weekly to continue building the communities that they have formed in person, to support each other, to not think that we're the only ones they need to stay connected with. And so that first check-in was just kind of like, how is everyone? Like, we are very fortunate to have, we get to work with a contractual social worker, and she helped us kind of think about that as well, and helped us think about our own self-care in this moment and what socio-emotional check-ins would be like for them. But we're also lucky that that's always a part of our programs, and therefore we had sort of some rituals in place that they're used to doing the same check-in every time. So when we jumped on those calls, it was like, okay, let's do our check-in. But the first week was kind of that, just checking in. And after that, we've kind of, each of the programs has developed a little bit differently what the young people in that group want. We've been able to do a little bit of live collaboration, combining Zoom with access to like Google Drive shared files. We've had, we had DJs building playlists the other day in real time that they had like done elsewhere, and like dropping them into a document together. We have, challenges that some of them are kind of working on during the week that then they share. We're posting some of those for other teens on our ICA teen social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. But, we're really just building that. And the reason I kind of want to focus on Teen Arts Council is because it's a little bit different, right? They're creative leaders. And so it's less about delivering content and more working with them to determine what to do, what this community of teens in Boston and beyond like wants and needs, and what they want to make happen. And so they've been kind of pairing off and working on different ideas of what they want to do. So they're planning kind of an open mic, probably on Zoom first, although they want to experiment with Instagram Live and various other things. But they're planning some open mics, some performances, some different things on Zoom, and hopefully maybe the first ones would be like during April vacation week. We're trying to figure out like what are the social things that people might want that week when it's harder to find social things happening. And they've also been working on ideas about how to amplify the work of Boston-based artists, teens, and, artists that are, adults as well. And they've been just working on different ideas. So it's been really exciting to work with them on that, and to kind of shift their focus from engaging this community in person to engaging that same community digitally. And, it's also really helpful in like one of the things our social worker kind of told us is that it's helpful in this moment of uncertainty and anxiety inducing kind of state. It's really helpful to help young people understand what they still have control over. And I thought that was a really important point, because one of the things that we're always trying to do is empower young people to know that they do have a say, and they do have, their voices matter, and to be able to kind of center that in this moment where there is a lot that they don't have control over, things that have been mentioned, like different situations at home. We've heard from some young people that they haven't left the house since they, this all started, for various reasons that are specific to their homes at all. So just giving them that opportunity to have a real role in helping us shape things is maybe more important now more than ever. And it's been really exciting to see what they've come up with. So we're continuing to kind of work with them on that. There's a million more things I can say, and I'm happy to chat with anyone. Pascal, do you want to go back to the other slide, which has my contact information? Perfect. So if anyone wants to reach out and talk about anything more, please feel free. But I will say that I think the thing we found that's working best is just, like always, centering young people and listening to them, and finding out kind of what they're looking for, and then working with them to make it happen.
Thank you so much, Betsy. I love that advice you got from the social worker you work with around having youth understand what they can control. It's probably advice that applies to all of us adults as well, quite honestly. So
absolutely,
it's great for us to try to remember that as well. And even just, I know Kata mentioned this at the beginning of this forum around really looking after the well-being of students and young people first and foremost, and not necessarily worrying about content right off. So I love that. So thank you so much. We're going to actually pivot a little bit and open this up to everybody on this call to share resources or additional questions you might have for anybody on this call, if you could put it in the chat window, we'd love to hear from you. I know that everyone on this call, there's so many, it's great to see so many familiar faces and names. I know all of you are really doing amazing, inspiring work around trying to figure out how best to serve the young people in your community, while also navigating all the challenges your organization and you individually might be facing. So I'm gonna just pause and let people open it up for questions in the chat window. So thank you. And Pascal, if you can move to the next slide, the last slide, I think, things that struck you, if anybody wants to share what your organization might be doing, other resources that might be useful. I think we have a pretty broad representation on this call of everyone from in-school arts educators, BPSArts teachers, to youth arts organizations of all sizes and disciplines when I was scrolling through the chat and scrolling through the faces and names. So, you know, one of the primary goals of this forum was really just an opportunity for folks to really just share what you've been doing.
I see there's a question about, somebody posted a YouTube video, Kelly Clark. So I think I could take a stab at that. There's definitely some copyright issues with everything that we're put in right now. A lot of publishers have been posting announcements on their websites that they're allowing people to post, like, even reading stories throughout this process of being out of school in this remote learning time. On YouTube, some things that, you know, you're gonna get blocked on if it's pop music that is copyrighted and there's no permission to post. I know for our dance challenge, we use Wave and Flag that I talked about before. And YouTube recognized the song, and instead of booting us off, they just added the copyright information underneath the video title. So it worked out, but it's really a hit or miss.
Thanks, Tony.
So Ruth, somebody had mentioned about wanting to know if there's any resources for National Poetry Month, and then Mark Van Jersey might have.
Van Jersey, yep. So I don't necessarily know the answer to that question off the top of my head for National Poetry Month. I don't know if anybody from Mass Poetry or 826 Boston or Huntington is on this call, because I know off the top of my head, the three of you I know are involved in a lot of poetry work with students.
This is Patty Wilder, I'm the volunteer manager with 826 Boston. I know that our team is working on stuff specifically for our programs around National Poetry Month. I don't know specifically anything that is accessible widely, but I will say along those lines, and thinking about asynchronous ways to engage students specifically around writing, we've been exploring a platform called Seesaw that we've been really enjoying with our after-school tutoring students. One of the reasons we really like the platform is that we're posting prompts and there's journal entries, and we're using it for some poetry work this month. And students can submit notes and reflections and answers to the prompts, but everything that is submitted can be moderated by our team before it gets posted widely, which adds a nice layer of security. And it's also a platform that we're starting to leverage with some of our volunteers in a remote and asynchronous way. So.
Thanks so much, Patty. And I think Denny just posted in the chat that there are also lots of resources available, I think, at the Poetry Foundation's website, she mentioned. So I think, and then Nadine from West End House just posted a link, I think, about how you can create art from a poem, I'm guessing from that URL.
Awesome. This is Erica from Mass Poetry. I just wanted to chime in and say I was actually the one who asked the question.
Got it.
Basically, I was just trying to figure out what other things were already going on, because one of the challenges right now for me is figuring out how we add without replicating. So mostly it was just feeling out like what's already happening so that we're not just redundantly doing things. I'm definitely aware of the Poetry Foundation resources, and I've been sending links through our teacher newsletter to all sorts of online resources to our teachers. So I totally appreciate that. But yeah, that was mostly, I was just trying to feel out what was currently going on. So thank you.
Yeah, Erica, if you feel comfortable, if you want to post your email in the chat window, maybe if others, as they go back, if they can think of things or want to share with you directly, things they might be doing to celebrate National Poetry Month, I think that might be a great way for you to connect with them.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Ruth, there was a question in the chat box about visual arts programming and struggling with interactive art materials. Is it okay to address that?
Yes, please do.
One thing that we've really been experimenting with are adjusting visual arts activities to be utilizing found objects. So of course there's the way of literally recycling materials to create pigments or to create alternative, writing utensils or things like that. But what we've been actually experimenting with are how to teach visual arts kind of composition concepts just with objects in the house. So for example, we have a video that one of our visual arts teachers for elementary school came up with to create a mandala by collecting objects in your house in even numbers. And then she shows how to arrange with something in the center and arrange your objects around this using the concepts of a mandala and thinking about composition of color and size and things like that. So of course, we're not going to get to keep that mandala forever, but if they have the ability, they can take a picture of it and pass it along to the teacher. But it's kind of experimenting with those goals and those ideas of composition without necessarily having the materials. And I'm sure as we keep going, we'll come up with even more and more creative ways to utilize the things that can be found in the house. We are also doing developing activities for how to create different pigments with things that are commonly in kitchens or things like that. I'm sure there's lots of other creative folks out there. Of course, that is not in place of actually having paints and brushes and things like that. So I know there's efforts to get those resources out to students as well.
Thank you, Mia.
Also, Ruth, there's a good question here. It's come up in several other conversations, but just around how's privacy being handled. This was in particular for dance and teaching artists being allowed to sort of be in people's homes. And then also asked, can we record any of our sessions for grants and other future purposes with confidentiality? But I am curious to hear about what other people have set up in terms of the ethics involved in some of this work.
Yeah, I am curious too, and I would love to hear, Tony, if you have encountered any, knowing that, teachers are interacting with students in their homes just around privacy. And I'm hearing from Nicole, the theater teacher at the Sumner, that they're not allowed to record Zoom meetings. So I don't know, Tony, if you've heard anything. Yeah,
so now we're not allowed to record anything with students on it, with exception, I think, the Flipgrid. And Google Classroom, you can upload videos. So it's asynchronous versus synchronous, like live versus uploading something that's already been recorded. But we're not allowed to record Zoom. And I could be wrong. And Zoom keeps, I don't know if anyone's experienced this, they keep updating like 5 times a day. So the settings move all over the place. But I think now the recording feature is not on the student end as well.
And thank you so much, Tony. And then I think Lisa from Raw Artworks, I think you said you could also speak about how your organization is handling privacy issues.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, that's been a challenge for us because even though we don't provide direct, therapy services, the organization is rooted and based in art therapy and creates a therapeutic space. So we feel, bound to be attentive to those things. So we created a template for permissions for our online, we call them check-ins. So similar to what people have been describing, it's like a kind of group light. But those permissions include getting email permissions, not passive permission where like if we don't hear from you, it's fine. Getting active permissions from the parents via email or from their cell phone that's then recorded. We also have guidelines around finding a secure space, making sure that there aren't others in the room, being mindful of other privacy issues, because I think the group format presents challenges that individual sessions don't. And using the raw care rules, which are sort of the guiding rules of the group, and modifying those for online content. What you say in here stays in here, and being careful about what others are seeing, what people are seeing behind you, what room are you in, not being in your bedroom versus being in a living room space. And again, this can be a challenge for kids that are in a space with a lot of other people, but trying to recreate that therapeutic and safe, contained space that is so much an important part of what makes the process work. I think that's pretty much it. And then modifying it. So with each age group, it's different. With each group, it's different. We don't have kind of a one size, fits all. In terms of, if that's helpful.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And just your mention about safety and confidentiality does remind me, and I don't know if anyone from the Theater Offensive is on this call, but it's also important to remember that some students already might not feel that safe at home just because of their home environment, and sort of that issue as well. So.
Right, I'm sorry, that reminds me, we require at the start of each one, the physical address where the child is remoting from, so that in the event, as mandated reporters, in the event that we see something or something happens, that we can then alert authorities to there, because you don't know where the kids are.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We have a few minutes for more questions before I turn it over to Kara with, I know, a couple announcements, and to Julia Gittleman to close.
Hey, Ruth.
Yes, Leilani.
Urbanity has been using Google Hangouts not for our partnered classes, but for our own in-studio classes. And Google Hangouts has a setting where you can make it so only the admin can record their screen. So what we did for permissions is we said teachers would pin themselves to the center of the screen, so they would be the primary person, and would record the class on only what their screen was seeing. And then it's an opt-in situation where students can take the class live and they can have just their mic on, they can have just their camera on, they can have neither on, or they can be present. If they're fully present, they know that they're being recorded. We're then keeping those videos available only to the families and teachers that participate in the class. We've found this to be a helpful accessibility model because we have families where multiple kids are trying to use the computer, or parents are working, or issues with the internet. So then families that are in these closed Google Hangouts can access the recordings of the teacher's screen at any time during the week. So some of our kids are taking the same dance class multiple times a week to get their energy out. They're sharing with families, but it is private and closed. And because you can participate without being seen and heard, we do have a couple families that are opting to take the class live but not be recorded. A couple families that are opting to take the class as soon as it's recorded so that they're not in any way being recorded. But most of our families have okayed their kids being recorded for internal use only. We have promised not to use any of those recordings for external things like grants, etc., without following back up before using any specific clips. So families have been told we may circle back if we want to use this for fundraising or grants. We will circle back with specific clips. We will tell you exactly this portion, which part your kid is in, etc. So that's the model we've been using because Google lets you set it. I don't know about Zoom or some of these others, but kids can't record if we don't give them the permission. So it helps a little bit with privacy.
That's great, Leilani. Thank you so much for sharing that. This is exactly why we're having this forum, so that people can share what they've learned, and all of us can learn from each other.
Ruth, can I jump in for a second? It's Mark.
Hi, Mark.
So I just wanted to mention, I put this in the chat box, but the Department of Partnerships has been, BPS Department of Partnerships has been really helpful over the past couple of weeks. I mentioned this because a couple of people, access to students was brought up specifically for partner organizations. Company One has the ability and to create Google Classrooms on our Company One email domain. And so our teaching artists were busy doing that, and BPS Department of Partnerships was able to push IT last week to open up the admin settings to allow students to access Google Classrooms from outside of the BPS domain. Company One also had to open up our admin settings on our end to allow people outside of the Company One domain to access Google Classrooms created on our domain. But I just wanted to say that it is possible. Schools have been really accommodating about getting student email addresses to our teaching artists to then invite them to the Google Classrooms. And they have now created an online NDA for teaching artists to sign if they are interested in getting, or if they need to get a BPS password. So they've been really accommodating and helpful in the last couple of weeks trying to get us to have access to students. So I just wanted to put that out there for folks.
Thanks so much, Mark. I know that Partner BPS, and I put that website in the chat. And I know Tony's also been working really closely with them. Just knowing how many of you are working and partnering with schools and arts teachers. I'm actually going to turn this over right now to Kara. I know if you had any closing last announcements or points, and then Julia Gittleman will close us out.
Great, thanks. And I think I saw a couple of questions about, would all of this be captured from the chat? I think that we can commit to cataloging all the links that have been shared in here and making sure that we can send those back around just in case people weren't able to capture it. Yes, we will do that. Oh, I just want to say thank you everybody for this meeting and for joining and giving your time, and for the presenters sharing all this information. I'm super blown away by the amount of work that's going into everything right now. And there's a lot of lessons in here for us as well. For Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, there are tools that you guys are using that we don't know at all. So this has been informative for me too. I just wanted to say, just pivoting a little bit, that today is One Boston Day, and I just wanted to send a couple of links into the chat about ways to just participate in some of the activity that's happening today. For those who don't know, One Boston Day is a day that we celebrate every year, the resilience and strength demonstrated by the people of Boston in response to the marathon bombings on April 15th, 2013. Obviously, in this time with COVID-19, that has also a different context, but still a similar message of strength and resilience, and sending messages of support and love to people. And so I'm going to put in the chat just a few creative ways to engage in One Boston Day. And one in particular that we've been working on is something called Messages of Love. And this is a form where you can nominate somebody in your life, anybody who you think needs a message of support, to receive a message of support from another person in Boston. And you can also sign up to actually create a message of support, whether that's like a pep talk or a song or a dance or a piece of visual art, whatever that is. And then we in the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture are matchmaking and making sure that people get something that's surprising and joyful, and just something to lift people up in this time. So I'm sending that. And then the only other thing, we also have a new platform on boston.gov to share virtual events. And we're using this to make sure that BHA, other city departments know what's going on in the sector. So if you have things that are available to the public that are virtual, please share them on that site. You can submit them yourself, and that's going out to a lot of other city departments that we work with. So just adding that as well.
Julia, passing it on to you.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep.
So thanks, everybody. This is an incredibly exciting afternoon. As Ruth and Cara and Kata and I and Tony have been talking about, it's so exciting and important that we've brought everybody together. The teachers, our teachers of the Boston Public Schools, the out-of-school time creative youth development sector, our teaching artist community. We all care profoundly about the children and art creation in Boston, and it's just exciting to bring these three different communities together with a shared voice to be able to share best practices. The creativity and flexibility and passion that we've heard today is awe-inspiring, and just the number of resources that have come through the chat box are also incredible. This is our first conversation of this type since the crisis began, and I don't think we should stop. There's a lot more that we can share and learn together as a community of passionate caretakers and artists and teachers and community members. So please think about other ways that we can convene together as a community and share them back with us. We're excited that we had such a huge turnout today, and I think there are more useful conversations to come. One thing we just want to mention quickly is that as part of the Youth Arts Impact Network, which many of you are members of, I am still able to provide individualized office hours to folks, which we've been doing for a while with support from Edvestors and the Bar Foundation. So if there are individual organizations that need one-on-one work, please let me know, and I'll put my email in the chat box as well. Many of you probably already have it, but feel free to contact me. And also just thank you to the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture and Mass Cultural Council, who have been doing unbelievable work in community building, resource sharing, just bringing us all together to let us know that we're going to get through this together. So thank you all. And then Kata earlier put in the chat box an announcement about an upcoming training on youth development that the BEST initiative through HRIA is offering, which looks amazing, and it's coming up in about a week. So scroll up a little bit further and you'll see it's April 27th from 3 to 5, but we would urge anybody who's interested in sort of youth development and the crisis that we're in right now to sign up for that workshop. And I think that's it. So thank you again for coming. Thank you, Edvestors, and all the people on this screen. Thank you to our presenters who were amazing. Every single one of them did a beautiful job, and I'm just in awe at the creativity and effectiveness of what people have been able to do in the last month. So thanks.
Thanks so much, everyone. Take care.
Have a good afternoon.